imagine driving down a snowy, deserted road, only to see a mysterious woman in black vanish right before your very eyes. Or hearing the soft laughter of a child echoing in your empty house, only to turn around and find that no one's there. What if footsteps creaked up your basement stairs? Or you felt a chill, as if someone unseen brushed right past you? In tonight's episode, we're diving into some of the most chilling real-life encounters with the unknown. From the haunted halls of an ancient university, where books fall from shelves all on their own, to a soldier's final plea from beyond the grave, and for one young couple, a seemingly perfect apartment that hides a dark secret behind a locked door. These aren't just ghost stories, they're tales of lives interrupted by the unexplainable, of ordinary people facing extraordinary encounters with spirits who refuse to rest. So settle in, turn down the lights, and get ready, because each story is scarier than the last. Are you brave enough to stay till the end? Welcome to Retraced Echoes. Now you might be saying to yourself, Bert, where are you coming up with all these spine-tingling tales? And they're coming from a book wrote by Barb Shadow. That's her real name. It's called True Ghost Stories and Hauntings. Now this is volume 1 of 3 of the volumes that shows on the good old Amazon machine. I'll put a link in the description down below. They're a collection of real-life encounters with the paranormal, straight from people who have seen, heard, and felt things that just can't be explained. You might think of it as a one-stop shop for ghostly experiences without actually leaving and visiting the haunted old cemeteries or creepy old basements yourself. Barb's done all the hard work collecting stories that make you question what's really lurking in the dark. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to know the secrets behind the apartment where every cabinet door mysteriously swings open on its own, or why a lady in black seems to be waiting on the roadside in the dead of night? So buckle up, because these aren't just your average ghost stories. They're unsettling, fascinating, and thanks to Barb Shadow, they're as close as you'll ever get to supernatural without having to call a priest.
Tonight, we're heading down a lonely, snow-covered road just outside a quiet Midwestern town. It's the kind of place where things seem still, but not everything is at rest. This is the tale of a woman in black, frozen in time, bound to the shadows. So, if you dare, come with us as we follow the steps of the Lady in Black.
In the winter of 1997, just outside a quiet Midwestern town, a seemingly ordinary drive home turned into a journey just beyond the veil of reality for a man named Richard Collins. He had never believed in the supernatural. See, to him, ghost stories were the stuff of fiction, amusing tales fit for movies, but as he navigated those snowy roads that evening, his perspective, it was about to change. As Richard was heading home, he was going down these winding, hilly roads. This is where some old railroad tracks had been converted to a bike path, and it intersected with this road at the very bottom with a small bridge and a lone streetlight. The road, it was slick with fresh snow. He had turned off his radio to hear better what was going on, his tires crunching through the untouched layers. It was just him and the soft glow of that street light illuminating as he came down that hill. As he neared the bridge, a dark figure appeared along the path on the opposite side of the guardrail. Startled, Richard slowed his car, squinting through the lightly fallen snow to get a better look. Standing beneath the streetlight was a woman dressed entirely in black, her clothes almost as though it was from a different time. A long dark dress flowed down to her ankles, and a veil partially obscuring her face, giving her almost this ghostly appearance in the dim light. For a moment, Richard's eyes, they locked onto hers. She was motionless, her expression blank yet intense, almost as though she was studying him, seeing past the surface and into something deeper. She had a small purse at her side, her hands delicately gloved, and a muff wrapped around her neck. A figure frozen in time from a century that has gone by. Richard blinked, and she was gone. He slammed onto his brakes. His heart was pounding. He whipped his head around to see if maybe she was still there. There was no one. No footprints on the untouched snow. No trace that anyone had even been standing there at all. The road was empty. Silent, as if the woman had vanished right into thin air. That night, he returned home. He was visibly shaken. His wife saw his face and she asked if he was okay. He hesitated before replying, knowing just how unbelievable his story would sound. He would say, "I think I saw a ghost." The couple decided to keep the story to themselves, fearing disbelief or ridicule, but Richard's encounter, it was only the beginning. 3 years later, in January of 2000, their peaceful household erupted into unexplainable disturbances. Late at night, Richard and his wife, they would hear sounds of objects shifting, as if someone or something was moving them around. It started with small things like a toothbrush that would relocate from their holders, picture frames that would shift ever so slightly, and quiet taps on the walls that grew louder in the stillness. One evening, as they was watching TV, 2 lotion bottles slid across the table and stopped just short of the bedroom door, as if guided by an unseen hand. The couple exchanged a look of disbelief, their once quiet home now feeling like the center of a presence they couldn't explain. More mysterious occurrences, they followed, each one stranger than the last. Shadows flickering in places where no one stood, and faint footsteps echoed down the hall in the dead of night. Now, every time Richard checked, he found nothing out of place, no physical presence, just the lingering sense that someone was right there watching. Now, as quickly as the activity started, it stopped, leaving Richard and his family in peace for almost 2 years. Then, in late 2002, while remodeling their home, the disturbances, they returned. One day as Richard worked in the basement, he heard the unmistakable sounds of footsteps crossing the floor above him. They're heavy, deliberate, the kind of steps that make the wooden floorboards creak. They moved from one end of the house to the other, pacing back and forth while Richard stood below, frozen in place, his heart pounding. When he told his tale to the local historian, she confirmed what he had feared, that others had seen the lady in black in roughly the same location, and according to the local legend, she was the spirit of a woman from the 1800s bound to the land by some unfinished business or a tragic end. And he claimed to have seen her watching from the side of the road, waiting for something or someone that never arrived. Richard's last encounter with the lady in black was years ago now. But every time he finds himself driving down that hill, he finds himself glancing over just beyond the guardrail, wondering if maybe she's still there. Perhaps she's still waiting, hidden in the shadows, glimpsed only by those willing to look a little bit closer.
In the quiet suburbs where every house holds its secrets, one family found themselves with an unexpected guest, a boy who isn't supposed to be there. He appears when you least expect him, and leaves only questions in his wake. Settle in as we uncover the mystery of the little boy on the stairs.
Even for a family of ghost hunters, the most haunting experiences sometimes happen when you're closest to home. In the quiet suburb where Steve and his family lived, the walls of their home, it held far more than just the memories that they made together. It started out small, almost charming occurrences, a slight chill in the air, objects that would shift just enough to kind of make you second guess your memory. But one Saturday afternoon, Steve experienced something that was impossible for him to brush off. It was a calm afternoon and the family, they were out visiting local museums, leaving Steve alone in the house with the family dog, Misha. Now, Misha was a beautiful golden retriever and her favorite spot was at the top of the staircase. From there, she could kind of survey the main floor, keep an eye on Steve when he was in the kitchen. She would find her way down the stairway as Steve kind of headed towards the kitchen because, Free snack. Steve chuckled as he rubbed her belly. The house, it was unusually quiet and serene. As he would stand there and pet Misha, he would glance up at the top of the stairway, and there, looking down on him, was that of a little boy. He's probably 4 or 5 years old. He had blonde hair and old-fashioned clothes. In fact, he had on a blue shirt, black pants, and some old suspenders. The boy would smile at Steve, waving in a very friendly, almost innocent way. For a heartbeat, Steve's mind was reeling. He was no stranger to the paranormal, but he had never seen a full-color apparition, let alone one as vivid as a little boy standing just a few feet away. Now instinct kicked in, and Steve knew he had a camera in his office. So he went and ran to get the camera. See, for him, he's going to get a picture of this little boy. But when he returned, the boy was, of course, gone. But he wasn't done. He went and grabbed his EMF detector. Now, that's a tool that detects electromagnetic fields, and a lot of times that's associated with finding the locations where ghosts can be found. Of course, Steve hurried back with it in his hand. Now, back then, instead of having little lights on it, it had this little sweeping needle that would go back and forth. And as he would run this across the staircase, that needle was just spiking wildly. It would drop all the way down to zero, then all the way back, almost as though whatever energy was there was still present. But just as quickly as it was bouncing back and forth, it come to a complete stop. It was almost like the spirit had walked away, like it left. Now that night, Steve shared the story with his 13-year-old daughter, who had always been relatively sensitive to the supernatural. She listened very carefully, then nodded, describing a boy that she had seen before. It was a boy with the same blonde hair and with vintage clothes, who oftentimes was found peeking around corners and watching her from afar. This wasn't the first time that he had been seen, but it was the first time that he revealed himself so clearly. Over the next few months, the boy appeared several more times. Each sighting was quicker than the last. Sometimes it was Steve who glimpsed him just right out of the corner of his eye. A flash of movement by the stairs or near the family room. Other times it was his daughter who spotted him, a silent companion that lingered in the shadows, as if he was a part of the family, watching and waiting, and occasionally acknowledging their presence with a very gentle wave. One evening, as they gathered in the family room, Steve decided to reach out. He spoke very softly to the boy, inviting him to come join them, to tell them why he was still there. Now, even though the boy didn't answer that night, Steve and his family, they knew he was there. He was a silent spirit tethered to their home by a mystery that only he understood. They never did learn the boy's story, but they came to realize that he had become a part of their lives in a house filled with echoes of the living. One child's spirit found a way to make his voice heard, even if only through a smile and a wave from the top of the stairs.
It started with a single sound, a faint knock, a whispered echo, something just out of sight. For Sarah Williams, the silence of her home became a gateway to something far more unsettling. Listen close, because tonight we're following the echoes of a story that will have you asking, did you hear that?
Sometimes it's not what we see that sends chills down our spines. It's what we hear. For Sarah Williams, it wasn't an apparition that haunted her home, but a series of sounds that left her questioning what lingered in the quiet spaces of her home. It started with a simple, kind of unexplainable noise, and over the years, it grew into a symphony of unsettling disturbances. It was a calm October afternoon in 2007. See, the kids were in school, the house was empty, and Sarah, she settled into the living room for some quiet reading time. But her peaceful afternoon, it was interrupted by the steady sound of footsteps echoing from the basement stairs. She froze, the rhythmic tapping of feet growing closer with each step. There's no reason anyone should be on the basement. No one she knew should be coming up those stairs at this hour. Her heart was pounding. Sarah would clutch for the nearest object she could find and approach the basement door, steadying herself to confront whatever or whoever was on the other side of that door. But when she flung open the door, there was only silence. The basement was empty, the stairs deserted. It was as if the footsteps had melted into the stillness, leaving her questioning if she really heard what she thought she heard at all. But the memory of that sound, so real and so close, lingered long after the house had settled back into its familiar quiet. Now months passed and Sarah convinced herself that it was just her imagination. But in June of 2008, something else would occur that would shatter her sense of calm. See, it was late one night, the family all laid in bed. Her oldest daughter bolted upright, startled by the rattling sound of the basement door, as though someone was desperately trying to get in from the other side. The door shook, stopped, and then shook again, a rhythm as persistent as it was eerie. When her daughter finally summoned the courage to open it, she found nothing but empty, dark stairway stretching down into the shadows. The years went by, but the disturbances, they continued, each one more unexplainable than the last. It was the fall of 2018. Sarah and her daughter, they heard a knocking on the front door. Now they was down to the basement doing laundry. They would look at each other with this puzzled kind of look. They was curious if maybe someone forgot something, but when the daughter went and opened the door, there was no one there, just the stillness of the night and the rustling of the leaves outside. Sarah's daughter, she was certain that she heard a car drive away just moments before, but when she checked, there was no signs of visitors. Then there was this loud bang.
What was that?
A deafening thud against their daughter's bedroom wall one evening when they was in the living room. "Who threw a shoe?" her daughter shouted, convinced that there was an object that was hurled at the wall. But when they investigated, the hallway was empty. There was no shoe, no evidence of anything being thrown. Over time, Sarah kind of began to accept that her home might be the passageway of something unseen. She noticed patterns, strange occurrences that seemed like someone, something was trying to be noticed, desperately reaching across the veil. Each unexplainable sound, every knock, every rattle of the door, it felt like a whisper from a world just beyond her reach. Years later, Sarah would reflect on those very moments, wondering who or what had tried so persistently to reach out. And every now and then, when the house is super quiet and she's alone, she listens very closely, wondering if she might hear it again. The slow, steady footsteps coming from the basement stairs.
Welcome to Norwich University, a place steeped in history and haunted by its past. Here, on this ancient campus, students and staff have witnessed things that defy logic. Lights flickering, books falling, and shadows that move on their own. Lock the doors and join us as we step into the halls of a creepy campus.
For as long as anyone can remember, Norwich University, it had been steeped in whispers of the supernatural, with the history stretching back almost 2 centuries. Every creak and every shadow and every unexplainable sound, it seemed to hold echoes of a long-forgotten tragedy. But for a young college student named Mike, these were just stories, tales meant to spook and scare the freshmen. Well, that was until one bitter December night when his quiet routine shift as a campus security guard turned into something that he would never forget. It was December 23rd. Mike had volunteered to patrol the campus while most students and faculty, they was away on holiday. The air was cold, it was frigid, the kind of cold that seeps right through the thickest of jackets, and with campus nearly deserted, it was especially lonely at night. Midnight approached, and Mike began his rounds, his breath misting in the air while he checked the doors and the windows across the vast empty campus. As he moved through the old library, something strange caught his eye. A single light that was glowing on the lower floor rooms. Now, he was super confused by this, but he went and he switched it off. Only a few moments later, he would return and find it burning once again. He would go back inside and turn it off a second time. Now with this, there was an unease that was creeping up his spine. But old buildings, they have quirks, he would tell himself. Maybe it was a glitch or a timer that he missed. But every single time he would return, the same light would be flicked back on, stubbornly defying his attempts to darken the room. Now in another part of the library, a large leatherbound book had fallen from a very high shelf. The library was silent, its ancient dusty shelves unmoving, yet the book's presence on the floor, it seemed almost deliberate. He put it back, feeling the weight of the library's history pressing in on him, almost as though the walls themselves was watching. Then came the banging, a steady rhythmic thud echoing from an empty front office. Heart pounding, Mike ventured towards the sound, only to have it stop abruptly, as if mocking his curiosity. But when he stepped inside, the floors creaked, a sound very identical to his own footsteps from moments earlier, mirroring his very movement. But the final straw came when he looked up at some snowflake decorations. It was not uncommon for them to be swaying back and forth, but not tonight. Instead of swaying, they were spinning very slowly, unnaturally, in full circles. That was enough. Muttering a very quick prayer, Mike ran from the library, locking everything behind him and declaring that whoever was there, they could keep it. He didn't look back as he left, but he was certain that he would never be alone in that library again. The next night was Christmas Eve. He returned to the campus, but he stayed very clear of the library. He had no interest in going back. As he patrolled Partridge Hall, one of the oldest buildings on campus, the alarm began to go off. It was in the computer lab. On his way there, he knew what he was going to find, some student trying to sneak in. But when he got there, he found that it was completely empty. All the doors and the windows were locked. The room was freezing cold, despite the heater going off nearby. As he moved to reset the alarm, the silence was shattered by the violent bang, shaking the very door right beside him. Mike jumped back, barely catching his breath, convinced that he was just inches away from some very real and very present threats. But when he would look, the room was empty, its door still locked tight. All he found was an old soda can that somehow toppled to the floor, and how cold it was a reminder of just how cold that room had become. In the days that followed, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that he'd brushed up against something old, something waiting in those old empty halls. And though he never spoke of the night again, he knew one thing for certain: Norwich University held secrets that would never rest.
In the solemn grounds of Bath National Cemetery, the echoes of forgotten soldiers linger. One visitor heard a name whispered on the wind, a call from beyond the grave pleading to be remembered. Tonight we journey through the silence of the soldier's last request.
It was in the quiet of Bath National Cemetery in New York, a place where soldiers from as far back as the 1700s would rest. It was one late afternoon. A woman and her young daughter, Carrie, decided to visit this historical cemetery. With deep respect of those who had served, they found themselves wandering amongst the graves, praying silently for the fallen. As they walked up the road that curved around the cemetery's hillside, the stillness was interrupted by an unmistakable presence. Carrie heard it first, a silent voice reaching out from beyond the veil. She heard a name whispered, but clear. Cassidy. Startled yet curious, she turned to her mother. They both just kind of stood there, completely confused, and wondered if perhaps a soldier named Cassidy might be amongst the graves in the cemetery. Completely driven by this encounter, they returned home where Carrie's mother, she dove into research, seeking any kind of clues about a soldier named Cassidy. And online records confirmed her very suspicion. 5 soldiers with the surname Cassidy were all buried in Bath National Cemetery, all honored for their service. One name in particular, Michael Cassidy, stood out. His resting place was carefully marked in her notes, including the exact section, row, and stone. Days later, mother and daughter would return to the cemetery, armed with a brand new knowledge and a resolve to honor the soldier that called out to them. They would park on the hillside road, and they began their search. As they neared a row of gravestones, where one of the Cassidys was said to rest, Carrie came to an abrupt halt. "It's not up here," she said. "He's down below." Although her mother had not shared the detailed locations with her, Carrie insisted on heading down the hill. Seemed as though there was like an invisible hand that was guiding her, leading them lower into the cemetery, closer to the section where Michael Cassidy's gravestone lay waiting. Following Carrie's lead, they researched the bottom rows, each step filled with anticipation. As they walked, her mother tried to keep her face calm, suppressing any signs that she already knew where Cassidy's grave should be. Carrie moved with a purpose. As she would reach a stone and stopped, her gaze fixed. "He's here," she whispered with conviction. Her mother's heart raced as she watched her daughter point to the exact gravestone, Michael Cassidy's final resting place. A wave of astonishment swept over her. There was no possible way that Carrie could know this exact spot. But as they stood by the grave, an eerie but peaceful silence that seemed to surround them. It was as if they had fulfilled an unspoken request. Later, sitting in the grass by Michael Cassidy's grave, Carrie's mother called out, why would he reach out to them? Though it was a quiet moment, she felt as though Cassidy's spirit had maybe just been longing for some type of recognition, a chance to connect with a world that he had left far, far behind. In the months that followed, mother and daughter would return to Bath National Cemetery in each visit, deepening their connection with the past. See, the experience became a part of their lives, a quiet, haunting reminder that some spirits, even though that of brave soldiers, they linger on, seeking a voice in the silence of time.
An old apartment above a bar, a perfect setup, or so they thought. But behind one closed door, something watches. Footsteps echo, doors slam, and shadows seem to move on their own. Lock the door behind you as we enter the story of Stay Out of My Room.
In the spring of 2010, a young couple moved into an apartment above the Golden Lion Lounge, a bar where the soon-to-be husband was set to work. In exchange for his help running the bar, the apartment came rent-free, a perk that seemed too good to pass up. Excitedly, they began setting up their new home, filled with dreams and plans for their upcoming wedding. It was a perfect setup, or at least, so they thought. Now, the building itself was old, and while the couple was only familiar with the main areas, curiosity soon got the better of them. After they had moved in all their belongings, they and a friend decided to explore. The apartment had a very particular layout. The rooms connected to a continuous circle, each leading to the next, with the kitchen and the bathrooms positioned to the side. They ran through every room like kids exploring a new playground, laughing and calling out to each other as they discovered the twists and turns of their new home. But their playful exploration, it came to an abrupt halt when they stumbled upon a small closet-like room hidden away, a space unlike the others. The door stood ajar, inviting yet foreboding. As they peered inside, a wave of unease settled upon them, the atmosphere thick and heavy, as if the air itself resisted their presence. Instinctively, they took a step back, and they exchanged very nervous glances. Did you feel that as well? one of them asked, breaking the silence. Whatever lingered in the room felt wrong. They decided then and there that the room would remain shut, untouched and unused. Sealing it off, they set a dresser in front of the door, almost as though they was trying to reinforce their decision to leave it alone. In the weeks that followed, however, the small room cast a shadow over the apartment. Odd, unsettling sensations crept into their lives whenever the man went to put something away in the main storage room, which connected to the mystery room. He would find himself hurrying, plagued by an irrational feeling that something was watching him from the shadows. Nights became restless. He would often catch himself glancing towards the dresser, half expecting something to push it aside. His dog, normally calm and unbothered, would sit in the living room, growling and barking towards a strange area, as if guarding his owners from whatever lay beyond the blocked door. On the day of their wedding, everything went perfectly. A magical evening that ended with them returning to the apartment late at night, tired but happy. Yet as they opened the front door, they were met with a very disturbing sight. Every cabinet, every drawer, and door in the apartment stood wide open, as if something had went through their entire home. The couple froze, dread pulling in the pit of their stomachs. The apartment had been locked. There was no sign of forced entry. They checked all their belongings, expecting to see that things were missing, but nothing was touched. Money, valuables, even their wedding gifts, they were all accounted for. The only explanation was as unsettling as the event itself. Scared but determined, they decided to put whatever happened behind them, brushing off as just an odd occurrence. However, in the months that followed, their unease had only grew. Footsteps echoing from empty rooms, doors creaking open, and strange noises filling the silence. Their dog continued to growl at unseen visitors. His presence, both a comfort and a reminder that something wasn't right. The husband later spoke to people familiar with the building, hoping to get some type of insight. One person admitted to having some strange occurrences and experiences of their own, saying that they'd done everything possible to avoid sleeping there. Others mentioned waking up and feeling a heavy weight on their chest and seeing strange scratches on their body, marks that they couldn't explain, but the most chilling revelation came from their former manager. When renovating the building, he had stumbled upon an unmarked gravestone hidden beneath the floorboards of an old office. To this day, every time the man passed the Golden Lion Lounge, he can't help but glance up, halfway expecting to see a face staring back at him from the windows of an apartment that never quite felt like home. And that's it for tonight's journey into the unknown. If you enjoy these stories and want to hear more, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. That's the only way that this channel continues to grow. Also, if you have a story of your own, be sure to visit our website and submit your story. Maybe you'll be the next story on our podcast. Until I see you next time, goodbye.
Speaking whispers when the night takes hold. A shadow moves where the air turns cold. A lady in black walks the hall alone, her sorrow etched in the ancient stone. Footsteps echo where no one stands. A little boy laughs but there's no hand in hand. The creak of a door, the rattle of a chain. The past comes alive like a ghostly refrain. Feel the weight of what's not seen. Between the walls, the spaces in between. A chilling voice, a fleeting spark. These are the echoes in the dark. Ghosts of the past, they're calling out. Through the shadows, through the doubt. A silent scream, a restless spark. They're alive in the echoes in the dark. The echoes in the dark. The dog growls low, staring at the air, eyes fixed on something that isn't there. Drawers slide open, the bottles fall, a soldier's grave beneath it all. The gravestone hidden under creaking floors, the tragedy bleeds through these ancient doors. They whisper their stories, they won't let go. The living walk where the dead still show. Feel the weight of what's not seen, between the walls, the spaces in between. A chilling voice, a fleeting spark, these are the echoes in the dark. Ghosts of the past, they're calling out, through the shadows, through the doubt. A silent scream, a restless spark, they're alive in the echoes in the dark. The echoes in the dark. They're not gone, they're never far, trapped in time like a fading star. The soldier's grave, the child's laugh, their stories linger in the aftermath. Every knock, every creak, every shadow whispers what they seek. We walk with the dead, they're part of our soul. Their broken lives still make us whole. Spark, they're alive in the echoes in the dark. The echoes in the dark. Through the shadows, through the years, they whisper their truth, they whisper their fears. The echoes remain, they're etched in the stone, a reminder that we're never alone.